Hello, we're back for a third line day. We're exploring gate 37, the gate of family and friendship, and the third line is called even-handedness. When you get to the third line, the end of the lower trigram, you get to a line of adaptation, to the line of bonds being made and broken, to the wave of allegiance and rejection. So we know that in that sense, there will be an irresponsibility in relationship to the nature of the family. The structural theme of all third lines is adaptation. They go through their process of trial and error, and here they're in a very good place. The 37 is an opportune place for the third line. They don't know there's a 40 at the other end of the channel, the gate of denial and aloneness. And so they go out there with their 37 smile and they bump into the 40 and they meet denial. And it can be a shock, it might be a surprise. And they deal with it in the way they are designed to deal with it, making bonds or breaking bonds, making discoveries. Pay attention to where you have lower trigram lines and recognize what they mean for you within the context of your design. Recognize that there's always going to be a surprise out there wherever you have those lower trigram lines. We know the third line because it is designed to bang into things. It develops very quickly the experience that says, hey, I'm meeting something at the other end. In some ways, the third line is more aware of that than the first and the second lines, but it's still lower trigram. It still is a surprise when they bump into something. The lifetime learning here says the success of any group is dependent on maintaining order. And the exaltation says the ability to judge what behavior is appropriate and to react in a balanced manner to transgressions. The possibility to have the sensitivity to know what behavior is appropriate in a relationship. The possibility. The possibility comes out of the experience. You know, if you go back to the introduction line, the success of any group is dependent on maintaining order. This is something that is going to open up through the course of the life. You know, it's not something that is active immediately. So there is a learning curve, a learning process that is inherent in this. You keep on banging into the other, you may figure it out. You may figure out who is for you, who you can have the right bargain with, because that's essentially what the 37 is looking for. And the behavior that is appropriate, this is behavior that is going to bring resources into the tribe, the resources that are necessary. So this is the attempt to adapt in order to make sure that we can get the resources that are necessary. The tribe is deeply dependent on the ego. It has to work on the material plane to produce all these things that we call community. And all of that has to be funneled through the ego because it's the ego that has to do the work. The ego is the place of will, and nothing gets done without the will. So the 37 is there to try to get to the next stage in the tribal process, which is to catch the ego. It's essential because only the ego with its juicy willpower can fulfill the material possibilities of the tribe. In the detriment, an ironic tendency to either test incessantly the borders of acceptability or to respond to the very same tendency in others with severity. The possible lack of sensitivity to what behavior is appropriate. The third line doesn't know how to do it. They learn through trial and error. And this detriment isn't a problem. I mean, it's not about morality. The 37.3 can only enter into possible bargains based on being its own nature. If any of us live out our definition, we live out our type and our authority, then we go into a bargain as ourselves. And if you have this third line in the detriment, the fact is that you've gone in as yourself. It simply is going to mean that the behavior of the other is not really going to be correct for you, and there's nothing wrong with your behavior, even though they don't like it. After all, you're here to find the ego that has the right bargain, and you can share. Yeah, something you can support. So it's not about whether it sounds pretty or not, whether it sounds nice or not. It's not so important for the third line. There's no discovery possible unless there's a trial and error process, unless somebody is out there making mistakes. Mistakes are part of the learning curve for all third lines, and they are here for the entire totality. We all need the third lines to make our discoveries for us, to go banging out and doing these things, so that if you're not a third line, you don't have to go and do that. What really messes them up, what really messes any of us up really, is if you don't enter into things as yourself. If you don't enter into a relationship as yourself, then what happens is it's the not self that has to deal with all the mistakes. And if what they're trying to fix through their interrelationships has nothing to do with them in the first place, well, of course, then they can become a bit of a mess, because we're talking about an emotional gate here. It's operating in that emotional wave from hope to pain. And the 37, that smile, it can disappear as fast as it comes, because this is a duality and it is inherent in all of these things. So the family can also be the anti-family. Both sides of this line are about trying to adapt to a situation in order to get to the resources. The rules can be changed in that. Bonds can be made and broken. And this is the one where everybody has to behave in a certain way, and then all of a sudden the situation changes and everyone has to behave differently. We have to change the way the family works because the conditions have changed. And that can be very destabilizing. It's very important to keep in mind that the 37 is about resources and about behaving correctly to get resources, making the right bargain to ensure the continuity of resources, making the right friendships to ensure a flow of resources. And so the 37-3 will change their behavior simply because it's a way for them to get access to resources that they wouldn't get behaving the way they behaved before. They can feel a bit insensitive to people who were with them before when they were behaving in that previous mode. The 37-3 can end up being the kind of people that other people complain about because they're always changing or breaking the rules and then punishing you because you broke the rules that were there before and they changed them, and the very rules they break are the ones the 37 used to do, and you know how it can go. 37 is going up and down in its hope and pain wave. So we can add that to everything else that we know about this line. So the grounding is coming through gate 40 in the third line, called humility. Well, given what we've just heard about the nature of the 37-3, perhaps some humility is going to pay dividends here, especially if you're going to change the rules and punish people who are still following the old rules, and all in the name of maintaining order so that the family can survive. But always, I guess it's coming back to the thing that if you are going into it as yourself, and that's what you're doing, you are punishing people because they're going by the old rules and the rules have changed, and you have got one eye all the time on the resources of the tribe, then it's not wrong. And then whatever comes back from that, you'll be equipped to deal with it. It only goes wrong when we're not operating as ourselves. So this is, of course, the second report for today. The sun is transiting through two lines. At least here it is in my time zone. I'm in the UK. It may be different for you. But currently the moon is still in gate 19, hanging out, being needy and sensitive. And then it heads off into gate 13 at 4:35, the listener, the fellowship of man. This is G center gate pointing upwards towards the throat center. It's a gate of memory. It's a collective abstract gate. It listens to everything. Sometimes it doesn't want to hear everything that it hears, but the mechanic is that it hears or not. Let's throw that in because there can be a deafness here, sometimes a selective deafness. And what it hears here are the experiences of the collective, and it stores them up, and then gate 33 at the other end, either they've got that or it comes into them through the transit, through an aura, so they can then pass that on for other people to reflect upon before sharing those reflections for the benefit of everyone. And that's our third line for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Back with the fourth line tomorrow. And until then, as always, go gently.